Here's a post from Hades of the Ladies on Tumblr. She writes, I've been seeing some bad faith criticisms on separatism lately, but I will say I don't think it's entirely for no reason. For one, most Radblur users don't read theory. It's not unique to Radblur, it's just the internet culture. Most people just reblog quotes. So not only do we have a lot of Radblur users that are unfamiliar with radical feminism as an actual theory, but you have a lot who simply don't know how to conceptualize separatism. I'll be honest, separatism as a subject is confusing. It has many forms, many iterations and interpretations, and it makes sense that many feminists from all sorts of backgrounds get hung up on the details. So all I'm going to do is clarify my stance in relation to Marilyn Frye's work. Number one, there is no pure separatism, not in feminist discourse at least. Separatism as a concept is allowed to be varied. Not marrying a man is separatism. Not living with one is separatism. Not listening to male musicians is separatism. Many feminists can and will disagree. Number two, however, I examine the use of separatism, like all other feminist actions, based on how it tackles the primary modes of female oppression by male persons: reproductive, sexual, and domestic exploitation. In short, how effective is this strategy in limiting or eradicating men's reproductive, sexual, economic, and domestic control over women? This is also what Marilyn Frye is talking about when she defines sexual access as the ultimate form of male dominance and patriarchal power. Sexual relations is the primary medium for male brutality and control. Understanding that is key to understanding female oppression. Number three, marriage is historically and institutionally a primary mode of women's exploitation. Just like prostitution and motherhood, women are disenfranchised, disempowered, and de-radicalized in marriages. They are more easily exploited, sexually, reproductively, and domestically, and isolated, especially due to imbalance in domestic labor. Number four, I also examine the effectiveness of feminist strategy not only by how it disempowers male dominance and control, but how it empowers female agency. Things that empower female agency are same-sex spaces and programs, female solidarity, judicial and legislative power, economic power, etc. Number five, by these two metrics, I argue that separatism, that is divesting from male hegemony in any way and centering female solidarity in any way, is useful feminist action and a worthwhile strategy, but not a cure-all. I get a little annoyed when non- or anti-separatists discuss separatism as worthless or unserious because it cannot be done in total or even because it is difficult. All activism is brave and difficult because it goes against the status quo. I won't speak for all separatists because opinions will vary, but here's what I think. When I call separatism or celibacy a preventative measure, I am not equating it to being the solution or the only solution. Separatism will not stop a woman from being raped, but it will reduce her chances of domestic and sexual exploitation endemic to the sphere of het marriage and dating. The same way abstinence will not make your coochie immune to STDs, just make the chances of encountering them less likely. All we can ever work with as humans is odds, not certainties. Some of y'all straight up sound like that condescending ad for Bumble saying, celibacy is not the answer. It's an answer, one that works for very many women. But what about the women who can't? Wherever they are, the conversation is clearly not about them. It's clearly about the women who can. No separatist is out here lecturing women and girls being forced into marriages about feminism to begin with. No separatist is blaming the women in Iran or Afghanistan for what the Taliban is doing to them. Every woman and girl at some point knows that fear when recognizing the ever-present threat of male violence, while a rational response cannot be the solution. To live in fear will be akin to not living at all. It makes no sense to tell women to avoid every space a man may be in. I don't know which separatist on here is saying that, but I would disagree with them. That is a decontextualized exaggeration of what most Radblur separatists are saying. We know men are unavoidable, but the legally binding and socioeconomically significant contract of marriage is avoidable for most of us, especially Tumblrinas. Let's be serious right now. We know that women do not choose whether or not they are victimized, but there are contexts and situations where your odds can increase or decrease. How safe a woman is when it comes to male violence is significantly dependent on how dependent she is on a man. Separatism is not, for me at least, a conversation on proximity, but a conversation on dependency. Something libfems and choice femmes are notorious for scapegoating. Women are likely to be endangered by a man if they are at his mercy at any given point and in any given sphere. So the feminist's goal is to limit that dependence in the workforce, government, and interpersonal dynamics. The question of proximity is also not, for me, about whether or not rubbing shoulders with a man on the bus will give me evil male cooties, but whether or not my female socialization will kick in and I will end up deferring to him and his needs instead of myself. That is the vulnerability. Not that men exist, but that women so easily resort to fawning and pouring energy and effort into men for simply being there as a man. Women and girls need female-only spaces to combat female socialization. Without unlearning female socialization, female empowerment is moot. That's just the truth. You'll give a woman an education or a job and she'll throw it all away for a man. We've all seen this happen. Separatism as a transitional phase is still vitally important. To say that separatists are victim blaming for suggesting that women do have some say and some agency when it comes to protecting themselves is just ludicrous and absurd. Not everyone can escape cancer. Sometimes it's genetic. Sometimes it's the air you breathe. You don't have total control, but you can reduce your odds. That is the point of a preventative measure. It's not a guarantee. It is just an extra safety net. Some men can and will cut through it, but to act like women can't do anything about it but try to appease men, I find on some level insulting. Because men are not these immovable and invulnerable creatures. Our freedom does not depend on their sympathy or moral sense. Case in point, history. Rehabilitating oppressors is not what got any marginalized group their freedom. Some of you sound like MRAs, where the only chance women have is going to come from convincing men, and I'm just not sold on that idea, at all. So am I saying we don't need male allies? Also no, I don't see why this has to be fucking either or. The primary fixation of separatist discourse should not be abstinence, but decentering. Decentering men in our lives, finances, decisions, etc. Because women are an important, perhaps the most important unit in the patriarchal machine. It is our loyalty to men, our worship of men, our efforts poured into men that have facilitated the exploitation of our own sex. Being complicit doesn't mean we're any less victims. They are not exclusive in this case. Furthermore, foregoing marriage is not the same as foregoing love. You can have a romantic relationship with a man and not cohabit with him. You don't have to buy a house together or make yourself more vulnerable, either financially or otherwise, for the sake of proving your love or living up to this enforced ideal of what love ought to look like. You can have a fulfilling, loving community and life outside of romance, too. Why the fuck are we still essentializing romance and gender in rat blur? Fucking frustrating. We're all adults, y'all. We actually have to outgrow the Disney BS. Again, I'm not saying that liking romance is bad, but treating it as the end-all, be-all is literally for 12-year-olds. I don't care. Instead of arguing with separatists about what makes a good separatist or not, encourage discussion on creative ways to live the rich life you want outside of patriarchal institutions. You can live with your sister and have a male partner. You can co-parent with your best friend instead of a husband. You can adopt instead of get pregnant or whatever. Literally, there's more options now than ever, and I can't believe I have to keep explaining this to one of the whitest parts of the internet. More than anything, I wish the separatist discussion would open up women's imaginations to life outside of men, to focusing on what they truly want instead of what they can or can't do. Loving a man doesn't mean you want to live with him or marry him. Use separatism and separatist discourse to decenter men from being these beings of ultimate fulfillment. Straight, bi, lesbian, I don't care. Just make sure you're routinely in a space where you can trust that you are making decisions you want to make and that you are wary of the way patriarchal society constantly coerces us into being in exploitative situations that benefit men more than us. That's all.